Hello friends, I'm Nukebrush and today we are going to make greater Blight Drone of Nurgle.
Time to go nuclear.
On the occasion of the first 100 subscribers on my channel, I decided to paint something special. So the first flying model on this channel is mechanical bionic drone of Nurgle. I bought this model at auction, along with other interesting models, the painting of which I hope to show you later. This particular wonderful model was already assembled and primed black, so the assembly section is missing again. Several hoses fell off during transportation, but they were not difficult to glue back. There will be a lot of rust and I will start creating a base for it right now. You simply cannot find a better base for rust than brown paint primer. I lay the primer on several thin coats, so to prepare the bases for the next layers of paint. Now I take a brush and start creating on the model a more or less chaotic random rust pattern. Using different paints, from dark brown to bright yellow, I try to imitate spots of old and ingrained rust, as well as fresher oxidation. I dilute the paint with water and do not try to be very careful, since most of the work will be hidden under the main color of our model. By the way, the surface of the drone's armor itself is very uneven, in lumps and bumps, which will only help us with weathering and rusting. I continue to work with the brush and apply brighter shades of rust here and there, creating an irregular spotted pattern on the armor, and also on the propellers and weapons. When the paint dries, we can see what we got. Seems pretty good, huh? As you probably already know, I usually apply chips closer to the end of the work, but since this video is unusual, we will do the chipping earlier. In order to imitate chips on this model, I use Scratches Effects modeling chemistry, which I apply with an airbrush. I do not need to overflow the model too much, but the surface of the armor should be visually wet. When the chemistry visually dries, and this is literally a few minutes, I begin to apply the main colors of the armor of our drone. As usual for Nurgle vehicles, these are various shades of green. I did not have original paints of a famous brand at hand, but I think this is not so important, as long as the final result pleases the eye. I apply the paint in a thin layer and do not try to achieve complete coverage of a rusty armor. Acrylic paint dries quickly, so we have to work dynamically, so that the effect of the modeling chemicals does not wear off. After the dark green color, I apply light green to the upper parts of the model, creating a slight contrast of light and shadow. As with the dark green paint, I do not apply it in a uniform layer and try to work fast. When the paint dries slightly, we begin to scrape it off. Using a brush and plain water, I remove the upper layers of green paint, exposing the rust under the layer of chemicals. We need to work methodically but quickly, since the longer the Scratches Effects chemicals dry, the less it reacts to our efforts. When we are satisfied with the number and condition of the chips, we can move on to the next stage. The next step is to add more chips. Now, this is a more traditional method. Dark brown paint, a brush and a sponge. As you can see, the armor of our drone is too damaged, worn out, eaten away by rust, so it would not hurt to emphasize the most damaged areas with an additional layers of chips. Using a sponge, I apply several chaotic spots to the most damaged areas, as well as around them. Next, we take a brush and finish painting the damage, giving depth to pits and holes. Nothing complicated, on the contrary, it is pleasant to watch how our wonderful drone gain more rust layer by layer. Well, it is time to work on the softer part of our model. As I have already said, the Nurgle drone has a biologically living part. In general, it is difficult to call it truly alive. Upon closer inspection, it turns out that the texture of the drone's body is all scars, abscesses and ulcers. And the body itself does not look healthy, it is flabby and saggy, however, as it should be for the followers of the god of decay, pestilence and plague. Rusty armor without, rotten flesh within, that is the essence of Nurgle. So instead of traditionally warm colors to create a live, healthy skin, I took cold blue-violet paints, more suitable for dead flesh. To create deep shadows and folds, I used purple paint, and I make highlights using light shades of grey up to pure white. I also used washes to emphasize the depth of the shadows, as well as to give volume to various wounds and damaged parts. Moreover, I used various technical chemicals to imitate coagulated blood, bile, vomit, and other joys from Grandfather Nurgle. Let's take care of the metal parts of our drone. In general, they are presented in two colors, dark steel metal and copper. To imitate dark metal, I use a dry brush method and black metal paint. This is not a special paint for dry brushing, and therefore somewhat dangerous to use, since it has a larger pigment which flies well throughout the model, even to those areas where it is not needed. So be careful and try not to damage the already finished and painted areas. In this case it did not bother me too much, since the metal parts of this model are practically freestanding weapons and various hoses running along the body that has not been painted yet at that time. As for the copper parts, the careful work with the brush and subsequent washes to imitate patina and oxidation highlighted nicely the copper hoops that hold the rotten flesh of the drone together. Now we can start applying enamel washes. As always when working with aggressive chemicals, we first need to protect our work with varnish. Usually I use washes to highlight protruding objects and enhance shadows. In our case this is also important, but there are differences. For example, it is not beneficial for us to use too much washes, since the drone texture is complex and if we overflow the entire surface, then when removing the excess, it is easy to remove the shadows we need. On the other hand, the model already has too many rust colors, so we need to not overdo it and not cover the lower brighter colors with a dark wash. And finally, we will have another layer of rust, which will also has to be improved with washes, so there is no need to work too much at this stage. So let's paint something else, for example, optics. Iron without, flesh within. Our drone is alive, so instead of a standard lens we will draw a real eye. Of course, this will not be a healthy human eye, but an inflamed eyeball of a biomechanical creature. So I chose brighter colors than I would usually take, and which are also corresponding to the skin tone of our drone. First we draw the white of the eye, so to speak our background for the pupil. It is not difficult, the main thing is to choose the right colors, for example grey-violet with a shade of pink. Somewhere in the center of an eye, I chose slightly to the side of the center, I draw a base for the iris and pupil with a dark shade of purple. Now the difficulties begin. I draw the iris of the eye, for which I mixed purple with pink, and for highlighting part I used the pure pink color. Then I draw the pupil itself with dark purple paint. Now we need to make highlights in the eye. For this I use whitish paint with a slight shade of pink. Lastly, I have to create the effect of vascular inflammation. A thin brush, technical paint, true blood, and of course several washes, red, pink and purple, will help me with this. So our drone is ready for something new and unusual. The real rust. That's right, at this stage I decided to use the modeling chemistry rust oxide patina, which naturally imitates real rust. This product must be handled with care for several reasons. Firstly, this is a fairly aggressive chemistry, so you need to work with a synthetic brush, wear gloves and protect your eyes. Secondly, the result, although quite predictable, is poorly controlled, so we will adjust the final appearance with the help of washes and even paints. Thirdly, it is necessary not to overdo it with the application of the product, since while the chemistry is wet, it has a completely different color than when it dries. It is also necessary to remember that when using branded reagents, Activator 1 and 2, the color of the chemistry also changes dramatically. As a result, we can get both exactly what we wanted and oh my god, how can I fix this now? Well, I decided to take the risk and see how it would look in the end. In the meantime, Let's make a stand, since a regular stand for a flying drone is empty and boring. A raid on a box with necessary and unnecessary parts led to this result, something tank-like, even more rusty than a drone itself, stuck in the mud. So let's get to the mud. I used a ready-made texture mix dark mud ground. It is easy to apply with a brush, it is well controlled, and errors can be corrected with plain water. In addition to the stand itself, I also applied the texture mix to the remnants of the tank, simulating deep corrosion and damage. I also physically created some damage so that the tank did not look completely fresh. Overall, it turned out well, I think. I primed our stand with the usual brown primer paint. Just like with the drone, I created a rusty base for the main color. Using an airbrush, I apply several different layers of rust all over the stand. I follow the principle from sunken places and shadows to protruding elements and highlights, so I use the appropriate shades of rust from dark brown to yellow-orange. As always, nothing complicated, just accuracy and perseverance. Next, we need to create an imitation of the random appearance of rust dots. I took a brush and a toothpick and used splashes method to imitate rust spots all over the stand. Be careful, otherwise the spots will also appear on the table and other objects. When we are satisfied with the result and the paint has dried, we can apply the main color. As with the drone, I use scratches effects modeling chemistry, which I apply to the entire stand with an airbrush. We do not need to create puddles and streaks, but the surface must be wet. After the surface has visually dried, I apply the main colors. For the remains of the tank, this will be the two shades of grey, and for the fuel barrel, I used yellow. Again, we do not need an even unified color, since we will still spoil this layer of paint. So we do not try too hard, just highlighting the necessary places. When the paint has visually dried, we take a brush and using ordinary water clean the paint from those places where, as it seems to us, it should not be. We can use any brush to work with chips, with soft or coarse bristles. However, remember that a brush that is too coarse can damage the lower layers of the paint or even the model itself, so try hard, but not too hard. For the stand I used a coarser brush, since the remains of the tank should look even more rusty than our drone. Nothing complicated, but we need to work quickly so that the chemistry does not lose its properties. It is also important to stop in time so as not to completely destroy the top layer of paint. When we are happy with the result, we can move on to detailing our stand. In general, we only need to paint a few wires and hoses, which I made from everything that came to hand, from real wires to imitation corrugated hoses made of green stuff. Using a brush and various paints, I draw the necessary wiring. Again, nothing complicated, just a little imagination and perseverance. Next, we cover our stand with varnish before applying enamel rust washes. As with the drone, I will be using natural rust, so there is no need for too many washes at this stage. I use a brush to work with the darkest areas, as well as put wash around the prominent details. Very little washes are needed, and I first use dark and then bright rust to create artificial shadows and streaks. There is not much work, so we can move on to the next stage of rusting the stand. Unlike the drone, I use a different chemical, powdered oxide. Following the instructions, I mix the powder with water, wait about 10 minutes and apply the prepared mixture to the stand with a synthetic brush. It seems to be nothing complicated, but you should take the necessary precautions and also remember that the product changes its color dramatically after drying. Just like with the drone, I used additional activator reagents, which by themselves and in a mixture with each other create a unique color and pattern of rust, and in combination with powdered oxide create additional colors and textures. In general, I liked working with real rust. It is an interesting product, although not for every day. So, the finish line. The final touches for our stand are the creation of a swampy, spoiled, rotten surface in which the remains of our tank rest. I used ready-made texture paste slow river waters, which is great for imitating stagnant waters. I also used the liquid chemistry imitating puddles, to which I added technical liquids bile and vomit for a more visual effects of the presence of Grandfather Nurgle's creations. That's it! All that remains is to attach our Blight Drone to the stand, and it is ready to spread pestilence and decay to everything it can reach. If you liked the video and want to see more models like this, feel free to comment, like and share it. Also subscribe to the channel. Good luck with your models and see you soon!